Teddy Roosevelt had been extremely popular with the American people and was able to bring about quite a bit of change during his term in office. Remember, he became president in 1901 after the assassination of William McKinley, and then he was reelected in 1904. So when it's time in 1908 for the next election, he decided to allow those almost two full terms to count as his 2 terms in office. That was that precedent set by George Washington. So when he is leaving office, he decides he's going to kind of hand select William Howard Taft to be the Republican nominee for office. And remember, because Teddy Roosevelt was so popular, it was not very difficult for Taft to be elected in 1908. However, Taft never really wanted or liked to be president. In fact, one of the reasons he did it was for his wife, because she desperately wanted to be in the White House. But it was a very hard thing to turn down at the time for someone to want you to be president of the United States. And while he was a follower and was a friend of Teddy Roosevelt, he was not Teddy Roosevelt. Whereas Teddy Roosevelt was very forceful in getting done what he wanted, William Howard Taft didn't do that. He did not use the presidency the same way that Teddy Roosevelt had, and that becomes clear in his actions. Roosevelt is going to earn a nickname as a trust buster. Even though he gets that nickname, William Howard Taft actually breaks up twice as many trusts in half the amount of time that Teddy Roosevelt did. However, he never really gets credit for that. He does try to lower tariffs. Remember, a tariff is a tax on imports. He is going to try to lower those, but really doesn't get anywhere with that. He basically winds up begging for that to happen, and it just never works out. He is also going to anger the conservation movement. He opens up some of those government lands that Teddy Roosevelt had set aside as conservation, and he is also going to wind up firing Gifford Pinchot, who had been a close personal friend of Teddy Roosevelt. So what William Howard Taft does is he is going to kind of take a middle road between being a conservative Republican and a progressive Republican. In doing so, and in taking that middle road, instead of just making one branch of the party angry at him and angry at his policies, he winds up making the entire party angry at him for various reasons. So the progressive branch of the Republican Party is going to be those Republicans who wanted to see change. When we say conservative Republicans, we're going to be talking about those Republicans who did not want to see change. They wanted things to stay the way they were. So you begin to see fighting amongst the party members itself. This is going to lead to a lot of issues. So you had those old style conservatives, remember, conservatives don't want change, that are going to clash with the progressives who do want change. When this begins to happen, they wind up arguing over what the party should stand for, what they should be trying to fight for, what their party goals were, who their leaders should be. And when the Republicans lose control of the House of Representatives, Teddy Roosevelt, who had actually been on safari in Africa, when he hears about all of this that's happening within that Republican Party, who Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican, when he hears about this, he decides that it's time for him to come back and try to run for a 3rd term in office. However, because William Howard Taft was already in office, that's what we call the incumbent. Because he was the incumbent, he already was able to have that Republican Party nomination as long as he wanted it. So he wants to keep that nomination, while Teddy Roosevelt decides he wants it too. So you begin to see these two powerful men fighting for the nomination of the Republican Party. When it becomes clear that Teddy Roosevelt is not going to get that Republican Party nomination, he decides to form his own party. He's going to call it the Bull Moose Party. And the Bull Moose Party is the name of the party that is made up of his ideas, and they are going to be mostly progressive ideas. So he's formed this party called the Bull Moose, or the Progressive Party. So Bull Moose is the name of the party. The name of his new ideas he's bringing to the table is going to be called New Nationalism. Basically, He believed that federal power should be expanded to again protect the public. Remember, Teddy Roosevelt was the first one who really ever believes that the president's job was to protect the people. So he just believed that those powers should be expanded. And again, he is going to be very progressive and support a lot of reforms that are coming up during this time period. And you see here that the Bull Moose Party, all of those people who supported Teddy Roosevelt, there were parts of both parties that were appealing to those voters. So you see both the Democrats and Republicans trying to entice those voters, which is kind of what you see here in that bottom political cartoon. But the question is, who are the Democrats going to run? They are going to nominate the reform governor Woodrow Wilson. His plan that he's going to lay out is called New Freedom. He wanted to fight the triple wall of privilege, which is going to be tariffs, banks, and trust. So essentially, he was antitrust, against all trust, okay, those monopolies. He wanted there to be banking reforms. He also wanted to lower tariffs. These were all things that he set out as his goals. He is going to favor small business interests over monopolies. And again, he believed not only that some monopolies were bad, he believed that all monopolies were bad and that all were evil and that they needed to be broken up. So again, you see how this idea is going to be more appealing to your common American. In the election of 1912, your voters have quite a choice. They could either choose the Republican conservative, who was William Howard Taft. They could choose Teddy Roosevelt, who was the Bull Moose Party, the progressives, who had been a Republican. They could choose the Democrat Woodrow Wilson and his plan of New Freedom, or they could really become very radical and choose the socialist candidate Eugene V. Debs. What you see, what's interesting in this election is that the socialist Eugene V. Debs gets nearly 1 million votes. That is a very large number, and that shows just how much the American people wanted some big change here in this election. So this is going to be a very big deal for the fact that they had gotten so many votes. But what ends up happening here is what happens to many elections when there is a viable third-party candidate. That third-party candidate is going to take votes away from either one party or the other, so either Republicans or Democrats. In this case, Teddy Roosevelt was the third-party candidate with the Bull Moose Party. Since he had been a Republican, he is going to split the vote of the Republican Party, which is going to allow Woodrow Wilson to win this election without a huge landslide. He wins with only 42% of the popular vote in this election. So really you can attribute that to the fact that Republican voting had been split by Teddy Roosevelt running as a third-party candidate, giving this election to a Democrat. That's what this whole political cartoon here is all about. Your Republicans divided by the Bull Moose Party is going to equal a Democrat in Wilson winning this election.